So this video is going to go over some of how we can use signs and symbols in order to communicate meaning. And so we're going to go over kind of a very brief introduction to a topic that's called semiotics. So semiotics is the study of signs and symbols, and in particular, how they communicate culturally through both spoken and unspoken meanings that we have within our culture. Common examples of semiotics include traffic signs, wayfinding logos if you go into, say, a hospital, emojis, emoticons, and of course, logos. So brands use semiotics an awful lot. So when we're talking in semiotics, there are certain words that have very specific meanings within that field of study. So we're going to talk about signs. So when we talk about an emoticon, that would be a sign. So signs have two key components to them. They have the signifier, that is the sound, image, or letter conveying meaning, for example, the smiley face of the emoji, and the signified, which is the interpretation of the signifier. So when someone sends you a smiley emoji, what you interpret the meaning of that smiley emoji to be. Or in this case, we have the signifier being the letters DOG, and we understand when we speak English that DOG stands for a four-legged animal that is usually furry and is different from a cat. It barks and all the things that make a dog, a cat, and a horse. We understand that there's a link between the letters DOG and the real world signified, the real world thing that is being signposted by the letters DOG. So that combination of the real world referent to the thing that we're using to evoke it is a sign. So again, if you get the poop emoji, the fact that that is referring to something in real life, that's the sign, the combination of the signified and the signifier. Another example here, we have an apple that stands in for something. And so we've got a real world physical thing, a sound, a word, an image, red, the color red, the leaf on an apple, the roundness of an apple, the word apple, and that can be associated with a mental concept. So like fruit, fruit of the loom, freshness, healthy, or sometimes temptation and sin. Do you give your teacher an apple, or the computer logo? So there are lots of things that a sign can mean based on context and other things. And this was something that was put forward by a French linguist and theorizer named Frédéric Saussure. And so if you see anything about Saussurian, that is who they're talking about. So signifiers are often referred to as either icons, and icons are when there's a physical resemblance to the object, or there is a sound or a picture that goes along with it. I'm going to show you an example visually in a second. Symbols, on the other hand, unlike an icon, doesn't have a physical resemblance, but we've learned that there's a link. So a warning sign, something that's like a triangle with an exclamation point in the middle. We know that that's warning. We know that there's danger involved. We've had to learn that through culture. Whereas a picture of an apple, we understand, can stand in for an actual apple because there's a physical resemblance between the two things, or the dog picture. And an index means that there is a link between the two, but it's maybe not literal. So the index exists because of the existence of the signifier. So where there's smoke, there's fire. We understand that there's a relationship between the two, but they may not be literally one-to-one. So here we have some examples. The example of men's from men's room, that you want to go to the left by you have a left arrow. An image of a dove, meaning an actual dove. The meaning of a dove for peace is not as literal. That's more of an index. A gun for being a gun rather than, say, a gun for danger. Now with a symbol, there's a learned relationship, a question mark, cash sign for US dollars, the Hebrew star, maybe being a synagogue, or first aid. And in index, there is a direct link, but it's not the same thing as saying this is a dove. We're saying that maybe it's hot because on a thermometer, the thermometer is more full. So therefore, there's a relationship between thermometer being more full, and heat. Same thing with the fire symbol. In this case, if it means danger, we understand that this fire is something uncontrollable. Or the cigarette for smoking, the ability to smoke rather than non-smoking. It doesn't literally mean a cigarette in this case. If that dove at the top was standing in for peace, it would be index. It would mean that there's a link between the two, but it's not as literal as an image of a dog meaning a dog. And those signified also have different kinds of meanings. So we'll talk about things that are denotated and connotated. Something that's denotated is the literal meaning of something. A dog meaning a dog. Connotation is what's cultural. So that's where maybe dogs mean loyalty. Or again, a dove means peace. And that can change between cultures or even within a culture between different groups. Myth is an extended metaphor. You can think of it literally like mythology, but religion also uses it, and culture and society will use it in the meaning of like laws and morals, things that we think of as being natural, but that actually have been imposed by people. So again, I think images are really useful in this because it is kind of an abstract concept. But when we think about things like DOG means dog, then we have the connotation of things like loyalty, things like man's best friend. Big dogs might mean warning, stay away. So remembering that denotated is what you see, connotative is what you think. And then myth is taking that to a metaphorical place. And try to remember that meaning is cultural. So in the same way an apple can mean an apple, in a Christian sense, it can often mean sin because of the myth of Satan giving the apple to Adam and Eve. And it can mean in a capitalist and consumerist point of view, it can mean an iPad, or it can mean something that's by the company called Apple. So things don't always mean just one thing. So try to be aware of all of the things that your audience will bring with them when they see these images and when they see the signs and symbols you put forward. There are certain meanings that we associate with shapes, and different shapes, again, have certain cultural meanings and that baggage we bring with them. So I just want to make you aware of some of the more common ones so that, again, we can use this to our advantage when we're trying to put together a system that communicates meaning. Circles often feel friendly, warm, they feel organic, and those are the kind of reasons that Pepsi uses the circle as its logo. It suggests to consumers that it's engaging, dynamic, and alive, and the white strip that goes to the circle smiles at people, bringing a warmth and the friendship. You're going to share a Pepsi with a friend. Squares, on the other hand, with their kind of angles, have power and professionalism, and clean lines will often seem strong but also tranquil. So Mitsubishi Motors has this kind of combination where they bring together power, strength, professionalism, and quality. So let's look at Pepsi and Mitsubishi in a little more detail. So here we can see a number of companies that utilize circles, ovals, and ellipses as a way of evoking certain connotative information, things that we're going to think about. They don't literally mean that, but what it is that it gives a certain quality and a certain feeling that people are going to bring with them to that shape. And so in marketing, a lot of times we'll use this in order to get a certain feeling about a brand. And when you are using shapes, images, and colors, and for really abstract things, it's a good idea to understand kind of the psychology behind it and what your audience is going to bring with them, and especially in that connotative information. It's a lot harder to pin down sometimes. And here is the Mitsubishi motor. And you can see that they're kind of bringing together elements of these traditional family crests. And then we had the ship flag that was designed, that was kind of the forerunner to the beginning of this logo. And then you can see it being refined. So you've got the 3 oak leaves. And again, if they had stuck with that, it's very natural, very organic. And then you have the really hard angles of the other family crest, the water chestnut. And so they bring some of the hard angles into the oak leaves to give it a stronger feeling to it. And then it's refined even more into these diamonds for the Mitsubishi trademark. So we use this a lot in marketing. We're using it in a project to kind of think about how we're going to visually communicate something that's not visual. And part of this is to get us thinking in the abstract, because when you do think about, if you're making a logo and you're working with brands, it's about communicating these abstract ideas. And we can use these tools as a way to communicate things. Apple's a great example. They're very smart about how they use messaging and how they do their branding and the marketing. So the Apple has really wedded itself to identity, an aspirational identity. We don't stand outside for hours at a time because we do want the product, but it's what the product means in society and culture. So Apple is selling a lifestyle, a feeling, and the look just as much as it's selling that specific piece of hardware. And that's why the cost associated with it will be different. So when a brand is using semiotics in order to communicate meaning, they're going to be coding a message that as a consumer, we need to decode with our filter of our myths, of that connotative and denotative information, and of all the signs and signifiers. Again, things like icons, things like symbols, and things that are index. So we're going to take all that stuff together in order to understand whether or not the brand aligns with our identity and whether or not we want to identify with that brand. So this is a great way to think about how we use this in practice. Here's an example of someone breaking down a Heinz ad based on the semiotics involved in it. So it's this cut up tomato stack thing in the shape of a bottle, and it says no one grows ketchup like Heinz. So they've used red as their backdrop. It's considered the most appetizing and hunger-inspiring color. This is why so many of your fast food restaurants use red in their logos, either as the main color or one of the main colors. It's also the color of ketchup, so you get some denotative information. Now, the bottle is sliced like a ripe tomato, and that has connotative information, freshness, healthier way of life. And so that isn't literal to it, not to a bottle of ketchup anyways, but by supplementing the shape of the ketchup with the tomato, we're adding that layer of information. And the way that they've sliced it goes from looking like a straight up bottle into a sculpture. So there's actually kind of an artistic thing about what Heinz is doing here. They haven't lined everything up perfectly so that they've got this kind of innovative, interesting way of looking at it. There's no specific age or gender here, so they're appealing to anyone who's looking for healthier eating choices or cares about food freshness. And again, freshness is key. If you're going to cut a tomato, it's going to start to look saggy and not have those hard edges very quickly thereafter. So you can tell that they've done a lot in terms of how they're styling the food to get that look across. And the word grow in their copy also positions them as a company and kind of goes towards that healthy side of things as well. We're not talking about something that is sugary, that has corn syrup, but we're talking about natural ingredients like tomatoes and very much focusing on that. So that can be how you can kind of apply these ideas of semiotics, of signs that are made up of signifiers and signified, and each of those things conveying denotative, connotative information and mythic information onto the things that we see everyday life, like emojis, brand logos, and even that stop sign that you passed on your way home today.